Hey, hey, hey. Happy Wednesday. Come on in. Pull up a chair. The Gaming Gang Dispatch is in the air. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host, here at the Gaming Gang Dispatch, brought to you by, shockingly enough, thegaminggang.com, of which I happen to be the founder and editor-in-chief. So welcome aboard, everybody. Tonight is Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. This is live stream number 1059. If you're not overly familiar with the show, let me point out, super casual around here. Just hanging out, talking about the latest in tabletop gaming news. And I will usually pontificate about a topic having to do with our hobby, which I will be doing tonight. In fact, I am going to share some thoughts about why I believe fantasy role-playing games tend to be the biggest sellers. So why is the genre of fantasy the most popular as far as role-playing games? We'll talk about that after the news, of course. Now, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Lastly, this is a live show, so that means there is chat available. Now, chat's not on screen. It's one of the ways I keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. And you must be a subscriber to the channel for at least an hour before you can take part in chat. Yet another way that I keep some of the more unusual commenters at bay. But if you want to say howdy, maybe you got a question, a comment, by all means, chime in. I will do my best to respond. Plus, of course, when we get into tonight's topic, share your thoughts in chat. And if you happen to be watching on Memorex, which means not live, or is it? Let me know in the comments section. All right, so let's see. Who do we got hanging out in chat tonight? First out the gate is Mark Dandy, W. Forge, Pete Strakolich, Sean O'Donnell, Noel Inquisitor, Descendant Droog, sorry about that. Chat was kind of popping by and I was like trying to make that out, see exactly what that was. Kevin R. Smith, Roger Perdome, Lord Cost 2000, as well as Semper Buffo are in chat with us. I do believe the lovely and talented Miss Sarah D is probably lurking in the shadows. She happens to be one of our chat moderators. I do believe another of our chat moderators, the Madman, is gaming tonight. I think this is his Wednesday game night, so we probably will not be seeing the Madman. All right, so welcome everybody. I got plenty of news tonight, so let's dive right on in. Because Beadle Grimm is going to be releasing a fantasy board game this summer. Here's what I know about Ring of Chaos. The Temple of Chaos has been revealed. Existing only as a dark rumor for centuries, this ancient seat of chaotic magic has now been rediscovered. Within sits the legendary Ring of Chaos, a tool of unmatched power that allows the wearer to marshal the strength of the gods themselves. As a player, you will command a party of 4 adventurers, leaders, heroes, or villains. Survive the Temple Guardians, do battle with your competitors, and claim the all-powerful ring for your own. It's my precious. Oh, wait, sorry, that's completely different IP. Easy to learn, but challenging to master. Oh, I hate when companies use that line. It's never a good sign. No offense, Beadle and Grimm's. I almost said Beatles. It is Beadle and Grimm. But yeah, whenever I see that, oh, easy to learn, difficult to master. This unique blend of board game and deck building game mechanics rewards experience, strategy, and the brute force of a good fireball. Outwit your friends, embrace the chaos, claim the ring for whoever wears it. We'll reshape the world for good or evil. Ring of Chaos is for 3 to 6 players, ages 13 and up. Plays in around 60 to 90 minutes. It's going to carry an MSRP of $45 when it lands in stores in the third quarter. Rumor has it, it is an August release, so would not be shocked if this makes an appearance at Gen Con. That is a possibility. I should also mention there is a Platinum Edition. Come on, it's Beadle and Grimm's. You think you were going to get away with not seeing some sort of primo edition of this game? Well, there is. It is a Platinum Edition. It has some really top-notch, supposed, various different components, which I have not been able to find any pictures of. In fact, I'm sharing essentially the only images that are floating around for this. But it has minis in it. So as far as I understand, there are supposed to be, I think the miniatures are in pairs. So I believe there are 16 miniatures altogether. So 8 pairs of miniatures, which leads me to believe that maybe your adventures are available in pairs. That is a possibility. So this Platinum Edition will carry an MSRP of $95. Well. Tony Urquides and Kathy Evans are popping on in. Good to see you both. Moving right along. Steamforged Games will be releasing I shouldn't say will be releasing. They have released it. It is the Epic Encounters Local Legends Tavern Kit. Here's the skinny. I thought this was on the horizon, and then I realized I checked it out right before the show started, and I saw, oh, wow, it is actually out in stores. So I was like, oh, forgot that. Your complete tavern kit from the creators of Epic Encounters. Every tavern deserves to be epic. Taverns are a frequent feature in almost every fantasy role-playing campaign, yet they're rarely given time to shine. That ends now. Your party's tavern visits will no longer be a means to an end. With this 5e-compatible kit, you can make every tavern encounter epic, whatever your level of experience, with minimum effort. Because Steamforged believe inns can be more than just places to get your next quest, and running role-playing games should be rewarding, not exhausting. So, this has been given the Epic Encounters treatment. That means that Steamforged has taken their tried and true tested method for creating truly interesting pubs and boxed it for your convenience, ready to slot into any fantasy role-playing campaign. Inside, you'll find 10 fully realized fantasy inns, 60 colorful characters to drop in, and riotous tavern games for your players to test their wits and raise their spirits. And that's not all. In England, pubs are called locals. So now every local has its legend. There is a short video that's going to actually give you a lot more detail, and you'll be able to see much more of what is in the tavern kit. So let's take a peek.
In every land, in every tale, every adventurer in need seeks the safety of a friendly tavern. Isn't it time that those havens of ale and warmth were more than just a backdrop to adventure? Isn't it time they were, well, epic? Epic Encounters Local Legends is the perfect setting for any fantasy role-playing game. With 8 taverns to explore, plus 2 exclusive to the campaign, find a wealth of stunning art, unique NPCs, battle maps, and much more inside. With content ready to drop into any campaign, Local Legends takes the classic locations of fantasy gaming and turns them into an encounter fit for even the mightiest of adventurers. Inside every establishment, a unique tavern game, loved by the locals and waiting to be mastered. But it isn't all fun, games, and flagons of mead. Every locale has a legend to tell, and every legend needs its monster. Local Legends includes 8 fully formed confrontations built in the classic Epic Encounters mold, including stunning miniatures, perfect for any tabletop. Turn your RPG up to legendary.
Epic Encounters Local Legends Tavern Kit, once again, is available now. It does carry an MSRP of $39.99. This will not have miniatures in it. There are additional Epic Encounters Local Legends releases that have the various different miniatures, including the owlbear, which look pretty cool. I will mention we are going to get an opportunity to take a look at this because Steamforged Games is sending this along. In fact, they're sending this along as well as the Palace of the Drow Queen and I forget the other. Oh no, that's the one that's got 18 minis. The other is I think it's the Drow Rider or something like that. So we're going to get to see those too. So pretty nice. Pretty nice. I am kind of curious about this. Cracks the Bold, Kabuki Kid, and Russell Higgins, as well as Lenny Blade, are popping on into chat. Somebody had mentioned they never get an opportunity to get to use these. Oh, W Forge said this looks cool, but I hardly ever end up using such materials. To my understanding, this will not have playmats of these taverns. I think those come with the individual miniature sets, but it does come with 10 different taverns, and I think we get artwork of the exterior. I think that's what we're checking out there. Very nice. Very nice. Charlie Bananas is joining us. This is a first-time visit in chat for Charlie Bananas. And they say, hello from Britain. Well, hello. Welcome aboard. Moving right along. Arriving June 26th is the Pathfinder Monster Core Pawn Box. I've got the deets from Paizo Inc. The fearsome foes of the Pathfinder Monster Core come alive on your tabletop with this collection of more than 450 creature pawns for use with the Pathfinder role-playing game, or any tabletop fantasy role-playing game. Printed on sturdy cardstock, each double-sided pawn contains a beautiful full-color image of a monstrous fiend or foe or friend from the Pathfinder Monster Core. The pawns slot into size-appropriate plastic bases included in the box, making them easy to mix with traditional metal or plastic miniatures, bringing your Pathfinder campaign to stunning life. Of course, the Monster Core includes over 400 individual monster write-ups, including everything from common animals like wolves and bears to terrifying supernatural foes such as the Rune Giant or the Grim Reaper. There are 8 brand new dragons to challenge your players, including the power-hungry Fortune Dragon, the peerless Adamantine Dragon, the mischievous Mirage Dragon, the fiendish Diabolic Dragon, and more, as well as classic monsters drawn from mythology like the Minotaur and the Medusa, as well as creatures drawn from the legends of the Lost Omen setting, including favorites like the wicked Sin Spawn and unpredictable Proteans. This box set is going to carry an MSRP of $74.99 when it arrives next month. Interestingly enough, I have heard from some people not associated with Paizo, but I have heard from some people talking about how Paizo wants to move away from the pawns, which, if you think about it, it's been a while since we had a pawn set come out for an adventure path. If you think about it. But then again, if they wanted to move away from pawns, I don't know why they'd be releasing the monster core. I don't know. I really do hope that I get an opportunity to check this out because I have the pawns for, I want to say, Bestiary 2 and 3. I do not have the pawns for the first Bestiary, which this would help towards that, wouldn't it? Kevin R. Smith says, or asks, does this mean they want to sell minis and charge more? Well, they do have miniatures through WizKids. I don't know. I do not know. There we go. 245 Trioxins with us in chat. And they point out Pathfinder already does minis through WizKids. That is very true. Very, very true. Sean O'Donnell is hanging with the gang, says, that's a shame. Pawns are great. They are. They really are. And it's kind of cool because with the beginner boxes for both Starfinder and Pathfinder, you get some pawns, but you also get bases for the pawns. So pretty nice. Pretty nice. Jack Hanks is popping on in. Good to see you, Jack. On to our next news piece. Cubicle 7 Games will be releasing Ubersreich Adventures Volume number 3 in print. Yes, it is coming soon. It is for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I've got the dope. Ubersreich Adventures 3 contains 4 exciting adventures, alongside a comprehensive introductory chapter that covers the dramatic events that have befallen the city of Ubersreich in the wake of the turmoil and last days of the Enemy Within campaign. It includes new characters, locations, and plots, and it provides suggestions and advice on incorporating developments your characters may have experienced or caused during the events of the Enemy Within campaign. Ambitious noble families and the powerful guild masters vie for influence and control in the wake of direct imperial control, and characters familiar with Ubersreich, or who already have a reputation, may quickly find themselves caught up in the intricate plans and backhanded deceptions of those seeking power. Included in this volume is An Eye for an Eye, a dilapidated hunting lodge, a missing noble son, and an ominous painting spelled disaster in the forests north of Ubersreich. Mutiny and the Beast, political ambition and marauding orcs and goblins in the sleepy farming village of Geisbach. The horror of Hugeldal, a deceitful physician, a traveling carnival, and a lingering sickness beleaguer the mining town of Hugeldal. Some of the names they come up with, it's like, yeah, it rolls right off the tongue. Yeah, thanks a lot. And lastly, we have Mirror of Desire. The characters find themselves embroiled in the love affairs of the young nobility of Ubersreich with disastrous consequences. The 128-page hardcover with PDF, if you order from Cubicle 7 or one of their partners, will land in stores on June 12th. It's going to carry an MSRP of $39.99. You can grab the PDF right now over at DriveThru RPG for $19.99. The Badger is with us. Very nice. Very nice. Says we have a connection. So far we do. We had one last night too, until I wrapped up the news and then it all went to shit. Always like to see new releases, although I got to be honest, this PDF has been out for quite some time from Cubicle 7 Games. But good to see another hardcover release for Whiffrip. I like Whiffrip. It's pretty cool. Lenny Blade says they ran an eye for an eye using Whiffrip 3rd edition last year. Very cool. Very nice. Final news piece, now available in PDF from author Shawn Tomkin, is the Seafaring Adventures for Ironsworn Starforged. And here's the scoop on Sundered Isles. Sundered Isles is an expansion for the Ironsworn Starforged tabletop role-playing game. It includes new gameplay and character options, inspiring world-building exercises, and a vast array of tools and random tables for your nautical adventures. The Sundered Isles is a realm of wind and tide, mariners and marauders, rebels and empires, myths and magic. In pursuit of your sworn vows, you will chart a path through turbulent waters, venture across perilous island landscapes, delve into forsaken ruins and tide-swept caves, and visit far-flung communities. Over time, you will grow to command great ships and loyal crews, standing fast against dreadful and tyrannical forces that threaten to sweep like a maelstrom across these vast seas. Sundered Isles offers 61 new assets for the seafaring setting, many of which are also usable for your Starforged spacefaring campaigns. Mix and match assets from Sundered Isles and Starforged for limitless possibilities. What's included? Oh, there's setting info for a world of far-flung islands and perilous seas. New guidelines and options for the Starforged system, including ship and crew management, naval battles, seafaring navigation, wealth and treasure, character downtime scenes, and more. Rule references, including minor changes from Starforged to better align with the nautical setting. Extensive world-building tools for launching your seafaring campaign, including forging the truths of your world, building a backdrop of clashing factions, creating your character and ship, and more. It's a massive collection of system-agnostic generators and random tables, including seafaring events and encounters, weather, island landscapes, people, shipwrecks, settlements, ruins, caves, treasures, and more, as well as the Cursed Die, new option for revealing the strange and supernatural aspects of your setting, and dozens of cursed oracle tables. The 257-page PDF is available right now. I believe it arrived at Drive-Thru RPG today, and you can snag it for $18. Very cool. We have talked about Ironsworn and its science fiction version, Starforged, and a lot of people really dig this because you can play it without a GM, or you can play it with a GM, you can play it with multiple players, you can play it solitaire. You can enjoy it however you would like. Maddie C is joining us in chat, saying, here's hoping we get to the discussion topic today. Well, don't jinx it. This is just another show, just another episode. So, people are, somebody had put something like take two, and it's like, no, it's the next day. Pete Stracklet says, I'm always interested in ship mechanics, trying to find the best ones. Sean O'Donnell says, their group is fairly casual, but for himself, so he's struggling to figure out how to get them into Whiffrip. Maddie C's like, sorry. No, I'm just joking about, don't jinx it. Don't jinx it, anybody. All right, that is it for the news tonight. W4 asks, did Starforged replace Ironsworn? I think it has. Which is kind of strange because Ironsworn is fantasy and Starforged is science fiction. So I don't know. I have no idea. But it does seem like Ironsworn Iron Sworn is kind of on the back burner these days, maybe. I don't know. I do not know. I'll be the first to point out I've never looked at any of Shawn Tomkin's stuff. So always heard it's good. Heard it's good. Of course, I was just talking about Drive-Thru RPG. Don't forget, the Gaming Gang, thus the Dispatch, is affiliated with the One Bookshelf sites. So if you're going to go visit Drive-Thru RPG or Storyteller's Vault, Dungeon Masters Guild, Wargame Vault, what have you, please stop by thegaminggang.com first. Click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get a small portion of that sale. And all those nickels, dimes, and quarters really do add up and help keep thegaminggang.com around. Also, if you like this video, if you dig the channel, if you find thegaminggang.com to be a valuable resource, hell, if you just like what we do, you can always stop on by paypal.me/thegaminggang and make a small donation. Hell, you can buy me a 2-liter bottle of soda. Lovely. Lovely. Yes. And I have to say, some of you out there do stop by paypal.me/thegaminggang and make not small donations. So big thank you recently to Agile Monk and Joshua Edwards for stopping on by. And like I said, making very generous donations. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you who use either the banner ads and or visit paypal.me. Really, really do appreciate it. Quite a lot. Chris Lundgren's with us tonight. So we are going to be diving on into why I think fantasy is the most popular of tabletop role-playing game genres in a few moments. But first, I think it's time for a brief intermission. All right, after we get through the, help support the Gaming Gang thing.
It's intermission. Rise and stretch time. Time to refresh yourself and visit our snack bar. Got a yen for hot popcorn? Your favorite soft drinks are sparkling cold. The juicy Frank sizzling hot. There's delicious coffee, freshly brewed, and all kinds of ice cream and candy to tempt you. Showtime will be announced loud and clear to get you back to your car in time. So stretch your legs. Come to the snack bar now.
Hiya, hiya, hiya. They're shrimply delicious. Hiya, hiya, hiya. You'll go for that mouth-watering, taste-tempting, meaty shrimp mixture all wrapped up in a crispy noodle jacket. It's a treat you can't beat. So come on, join the folks that are getting fresh, crispy Flavo shrimp rolls now at the snack bar. They're shrimply delicious.
How about a delicious cup of Wilkins coffee? No! Strange things happen to people who don't drink Wilkins.
Once a normal, voluptuously beautiful woman, she drove into a nightmare of horror and saw descending from the sky a titanic monster whose fearsome touch became a frightful curse.
You think I'm drunk, don't you? All of you! I'm not drunk! I'm not! You've got to believe me. Please. It was right in the middle of the highway, 30 feet tall.
Once she's in the booby hatch, throw the key away. That'll put you in the driver's seat. You'd make a wild driver, Harry. With $50 million.
What she saw was beyond belief until others, too, faced its hideous, uncontrollable menace. Attack of the 50-foot woman, incredibly huge, with incredible desires for love and vengeance.
Hopefully, you weren't too terrified by that film trailer. Yeah. What did they say? Voluptuously lovely? It's like, what? Yeah. It has been a very long time since I've seen that film. Kabuki Kid says that they knew exactly what that movie was as soon as they saw the hand, and that the movie is a hoot. It is an odd flick. I do remember that. And then I remember Daryl Hannah did a remake. I think it was for HBO back in the day. So Kevin R. Smith says, thankfully, or fortunately, I guess, women's underwear really stretched back in the day. It did. It most certainly did. All right. Keldon, Travis Williams, and Chris Burkhart are with us tonight. We've got a nice chat rocking and rolling. All right. We are going to get into tonight's topic. And by all means, please share your thoughts in chats. And if you happen to watch this after the fact, by all means, please share your thoughts in the comments section as well. So let's talk about fantasy role-playing games and why they are the most popular genre of role-playing games. And I've heard things over the years from different people, but some of it I just never agreed with. So I know I have heard in the past, some folks have said, well, fantasy role-playing games tend to be the most popular because they were the first. So you had Dungeons and Dragons, original Dungeons and Dragons come out. So because it was the first that came out, that's why fantasy is so popular, which I don't agree with. I don't agree with that at all, actually, because it's not as if Dungeons and Dragons was out for 5 years and then another role-playing game finally came along. That wasn't the case. And it's not as if everything was built off of the D&D mechanics either, because Traveler came out relatively quickly. We also, of course, had Metamorphosis Alpha, which was a bit different. So we had some science fiction that popped up. As far as horror went, I don't think we really had much by way of horror role-playing games until Call of Cthulhu came out. So, Agile Monk is with us. Good to see you, Agile Monk. So I don't buy into fantasy is the most popular genre of RPGs because it was the first. I don't buy into that. I've had other people tell me, well, it's probably because fantasy was such a popular genre at that point in time that it kind of got a foot up on everything else. And that's really not true either. Because if you think about it, in the 70s, science fiction was far, far more popular than fantasy. Sure, if you look back, okay, so you've got some of the Ray Harryhausen special effects movies like Sinbad and things like that, but fantasy wasn't that big a deal. Maybe people had read some Conan. Of course, The Lord of the Rings was a big deal, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But outside of that, you didn't see a lot of fantasy being very popular. In fact, I would have to say probably come the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, probably one of the most popular fantasy authors out there would have been Piers Anthony. You know, that when I think about it, I don't think of a lot of fantasy that was super popular, say mid to late 1970s into the early 80s. So early 80s would have been when I was now starting, well, probably late 70s, early 80s is when I started buying like books, going to bookstores and stuff like that. I wasn't just getting my Scholastic books from grammar school. Tessie Trekkie says, I like fantasy games that land on the low magic Renaissance level tech and lots of beef and cheesecake art where men are men and women are men and the sheep are afraid. Chris Lundgren says, maybe it's because so many of new video games are fantasy settings. So maybe D&D and Target and Walmart. So it's the first intro. But we are going back to why is it always been most popular? Why are fantasy role-playing games the most popular genre? So it's not just Dungeons and Dragons. Does Dungeons and Dragons move the needle? Of course. But there are other role-playing games out there which are fantasy that do quite well. So let's see. Roll for Combat. Steven's with us. They said they've looked into the topic before, fantasy versus science fiction. Science fiction has gaming issues such as flying and lasers, while fantasy has swords, magic, and more gritty. This continues to the day. Descendant Droog says, so I wonder if there's an aspect of just this story feels familiar, but I'm only in my 30s. I haven't been in the tabletop role-playing game space for as long as others. So that may just be a now thing. Russell Higgins says, Dragonlance did a lot to forward that fantasy epic. Funny enough, the Dungeons & Dragons books sold well, but they didn't sell as well as people think. Although at that point, once they had a few Dragonlance releases out there, TSR became more a book publisher than a game company. This is the reality of it. Keldon says, who knows what Call of Cthulhu is? Chaosium hides it in its dark corners and wonders why D&D is so popular. I don't think Chaosium's hiding anything. I think Chaosium does a pretty good job of promoting their role-playing games. So let's see. Pete Draculate says, I believe it's the monsters. Fantasy monsters just go all the way. Kevin King is with us. Good to see you, Kevin. Fantasy is easier. There we go. Now we're getting on to one of the reasons I think. Everyone knows how to swing a sword. What a phaser does? Not as many grok that. Connor Dunning is hanging with us tonight, as is Chris Jones. Chris Jones says fantasy is Eurocentric and therefore appeals to our roots and souls. Kevin R. Smith says Chaosium's got a vigorous YouTube channel with actual plays that I hear are pretty good. Once again, I don't watch actual plays, but I have heard good things about the actual plays that Chaosium has supported, that I believe they've got them on their channel. All right. So one of the reasons why I think fantasy role-playing games are popular is because you can just say things are magic. Well, how did that happen? Well, it's magic. You don't have to come up with an excuse. You don't have to come up with an explanation. You don't have to come up with Star Trek techno babble to explain things that are going on in a fantasy setting. And fantasy is familiar yet new. But one of the big reasons is that Fireball is just a fireball, right? So as we heard from Kevin King, kind of pointing that out, fantasy is easier. Fantasy is easier for both the game masters as well as the players to grasp, to wrap their heads around. Strangely enough, it is more so than science fiction because people can imagine shooting a bow. They can imagine throwing a dart. They can imagine casting a spell. Sitting there in the engineering section of a starship, maybe not so well. I don't know. So, Semper Buffo says science fiction is more brainy, perhaps. Nolan Quizler says science fiction has one big problem, fantasy doesn't. Exposition. Yes. Russell Higgins says, they're talking about costuming for film costuming. Pete Strakowitz says dragons rule. Descendant Droog says the Eurocentric aspect is an interesting point as well. Thought it's fascinating that Call of Cthulhu is the more popular one in Japan. Yeah, one of these days we'll have to explore that a little bit as far as why Call of Cthulhu is as popular as it is in Japan. We've talked about why Tunnels and Trolls is popular in Japan. Some discussion of RuneQuest. Kevin Thorpe is joining us too. So, fantasy tends to be easier for people to picture as opposed to science fiction. Fantasy is also far easier for you to, as a game master, to world build. There's far less going on in that you have to worry about world building with a fantasy game than a science fiction game, which is one of the reasons why in many science fiction role-playing games, the whole world creation aspect tends to really drag for game masters. Great example of that is Traveller. We've talked about Traveller quite a lot, but there is a long system as far as putting together the different worlds. And if you're running a science fiction role-playing game, normally you have to have multiple worlds to deal with. So once again, it is far easier, in my opinion, for game masters to kind of kit bash their own goings-on with a fantasy setting as opposed to a science fiction setting. And then fantasy does have a familiarity to it. Because if you think about it, at their core, you're pretty much looking at Conan, Fafhrd and Grey Mouser, Lord of the Rings in some respects, Jack Vance's work, The Dying Earth. They're all, there's a familiarity to them. So even though Fafhrd and Grey Mouser don't live on the earth, they live on Nawan, there is a familiarity there, right? There is kind of a almost a Middle Eastern vibe to Lankmar that we can picture in our heads. Science fiction, it's not as easy for you to kind of picture. Because if you think about it, Buck Rogers, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Logan's Run. I'm just throwing stuff off out of the top of my head, right? They're all different. They're all completely different. Not so with fantasy. Kyle Chaplin's with us, says, fantasy is definitely an easier pitch for players to be excited about. Stuff like barbarians and wizards playing more fantasies than, say, a detective in the 20s. As a GM, I prefer Cthulhu to D&D. Good point. Tessie Trekkie says, Call of Cthulhu's first release in Japan was a box set that contained all the dice you need, which was a big thing, given that getting polyhedrals in Japan was hard due to their unique gambling laws. Aha! Kevin R. Smith says, also in fantasy games, you can make a town and a big dungeon cave complex nearby. You've got several sessions of material right there. You can't get by with one planet in Traveler. No, well, I mean, if it's your adventure, yeah, I could see multiple sessions taking place on a planet, but at some point, your players are going to want to leave. They're going to want to go someplace else. So there is that. So that is another big selling point for fantasy games, is that there's not as much effort built into creating your own, world building, doing your own settings and things like that. Chris Lundgren says, if classic D&D dice are not legal in Japan, how are they working around that now that there's the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons coming there? I think the dice situation is different nowadays. I think that was just in the 80s, I believe, or prior to it. AD is with us. Says they tried to set up a few science fiction campaigns, finally realized that I prefer fantasy and horror because I like a more limited setting. If I ran Traveler, I'd want to focus on just one world. Pete Strakulich is focused on monsters tonight. It says monster books sell like hotcakes. Bestiaries do sell very well. They really do. And I love when people get mad at me because I say bestiary, not bestiary. And they're like, it's bestiary, not bestiary. And it's like, look at how the word is spelled. It's like, come on, give me a break. Here's something else that I think is maybe another reason why fantasy is the most popular genre. And I think part of that comes from the power fantasy, the power gaming, I'm kind of a, meek, 98-pound weakling in real life, but I get to play. Right. Conan's a pussy compared to me. Yeah. I'm Bronan, the barbarian. I think that plays far more into fantasy than science fiction. Because with science fiction, the focus tends to be on the gear, the ships, the weapons, the various different equipment, pieces of gear, all that stuff, which even in a fantasy role-playing game, you're still looking at, he's got the +2 champion sword, but it just has a little bit of a different feel where with fantasy games, it feels as if it is more wrapped around the characters as opposed to the game world and the setting. Once again, these are just thoughts of mine. I'm not saying that, this is the way it is. Something else I think is that with fantasy role-playing games, it's far easier to escape than in other genres. And the reason behind that is because many other genres are in some ways built upon our own situations here nowadays or in the past, what have you, but they all stem from a reality that even if we're talking about transhumanism and thrown across the galaxy someplace else, there is still kind of the seed that emerges from reality, our real world, as opposed to fantasy role-playing games. I think more people play fantasy role-playing games because it's far easier to escape into that than it is for other games. I think another reason, too, is because for most fantasy role-playing games, you have a lot of options as far as the various different species you can play as. Now, sure, with some science fiction role-playing games, yeah, they've got that as well. But there are also science fiction role-playing games where everybody's essentially human. So, yep. So, there's the case there. Let's see. What's going on in chat here? Descendant Droog says, I also think that the variety of different species and classes that are common means there's lots of creative expression in your character creation compared to other options. Kevin Thorpe says, Fallout's a good role-playing game. Yeah. It's sadly for Modifius Entertainment, people have this fear of the 2D20 system, but so Dusty Trekkie says they're 5'4" in person, and functionally every one of their characters is an angry bearded dwarf. Chris Lundgren says it's also following the herd thing with fantasy as well. Everyone is starting off with that and trying to convert over to a new genre can be intimidating. I don't buy into that. I don't agree with Chris on that. Because there are, yes, granted, there are a lot of people out there who got started with Dungeons and Dragons, or they got started with 5e in particular with a lot of people. But I don't think it's following the herd. I don't think it's a herd mentality. It's just people hear stories about playing Dungeons and Dragons. They're like, yeah, I'd like to check that out. Kevin R. Smith says that might be why the two most popular science fiction franchises are Star Wars from a galaxy far, far away and Star Trek with a utopian future. Chris Lundgren says they bought Dragonbane 2, got the new bestiary as well, but they also own a bunch of other stuff. So AD says the reason they like Dragonbane is because it's built on the old Chaosium basic fantasy and magic world that came out with the Worlds of Wonder games back in the 80s. Yeah, it is. It does owe a lot to Chaosium and what's essentially the basic role-playing system these days. Kevin Thorpe said they got the Dragonbane box set thanks to this channel. It's a good fantasy system, and who doesn't want to play a grumpy duck? Kevin King wonders if there's a difference between Europe and the U.S. Our anti-intellectualism could be playing a role. But we haven't always had an anti-intellectualism. That's more in the last decade or so. W. Forge says, if the RPG industry started with Traveller and around when Star Wars came out, would things be different? I wonder. Maybe. Yeah, because come 77, there were some like science fiction role-playing games out there, but nothing, everything that I can think of off the top of my head is something that's pretty narrow in approach. So like Metamorphosis Alpha. Metamorphosis Alpha is not just a kind of generic science fiction sort of setting. It's the player characters are on a generation ship, which is massive. And they've been awoken and there's problems, right? And then, of course, it can go in all different directions. But for the most part, you are looking at that being a role-playing game where you just have your characters on a single starship. So it's not, galaxy far, far away sort of thing. See, what is the other, what was the other role-playing game that TSR released that was not designed in-house? Is it Jorn? Is it Sky Realms of Jorn? I'm trying to remember. Kevin Thorpe says, being British, they often wonder about the different playing styles between both sides of the pond. I would think that on the other side of the pond, there's probably far more black humor in role-playing games and at your role-playing table. And I would think here in the U.S., it's probably a bit more silliness would be my guess. Just taking a stab. Pete Stracklich says they're waiting for Shadowrun to get the justice it deserves. Might have a pretty long wait. Sorry, just saying. Cracks the Bolt says, I like fantasy in my science fiction. I like Starfinder. Second edition is going to rock, I hope. I think it probably will. I think it really will. And I get the impression that when second edition does come out in 2025, I think we will get back to the monthly releases of Starfinder Adventure Path chapters because it's been super hit or miss as far as with Starfinder releases. In fact, I just did my Paizo preview and shared Starfinder Mechageddon, which is all in one volume. So it's essentially a 3-part adventure path all in a single volume. And that's supposedly going to be the last Starfinder first edition adventure that gets released. Coco B is hanging with us. Says, starting in the 80s, switching genres was no big deal for me, anywho. Started with D&D, then played Star Frontiers as their second system, then played Gamma World, Chill, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was just games to us. W4 says 2300 AD was an attempt at hard science fiction. Yeah, it's funny because I know a lot of people out there think Traveler is hard SF. It's like, no, it's not really. See, to me, I can easily see running Traveler and just tossing stuff out that you don't want. But once again, it's me. I'm the guy who sits there and says, I don't really care that much about rules. Right? So, Chris Jones says, Brit here, we have a gallows sense of humor and it shows in our games. We like deadpan and self-depreciation. One of the reasons why I like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is because it does have kind of its tongue firmly in cheek as far as some of the things. And I love how it's like always, okay, maybe not always, there are a handful of characters who are nobles, NPCs who are nobles, who are actually cool NPCs. But for the most part, the nobility is just a bunch of dipshits. So, wrapping up, why do I think fantasy is the most popular genre of tabletop role-playing games? Because there is a familiarity to it. Even if you've never really read fantasy books or watched Game of Thrones or anything like that, there is going to be some familiarity to it because most people know what a wizard is. They know what an elf is. They know what a dwarf is. Not so much with other genres of role-playing games. Also feel that it is much easier for players to escape in fantasy role-playing games than in many other genres that kind of still tie back into our reality here. So I think that's something. Also believe that it's just easier for game masters to kind of roll with the punches, kind of go with the flow with a fantasy role-playing game, because you can always just say, oh, it's magic. Oh, well, or, put that seed in people's minds. Oh, well, that happened because it's magic. Other role-playing games, you have to come up with something that might be logical as far as the explanation there. So I think that is another reason why fantasy happens to be the most popular genre. And yes, of course, Dungeons and Dragons has something to do with it as well. But the thing is, if D&D didn't exist, I still think fantasy would be the most popular genre of role-playing games. You would just have somebody else being the industry leader as far as sales. So there's that. All right, let's wrap up. Check out a little more chat here. Nolan Quizler says, I've seen science fiction game masters spend half the session in exposition. All right, everybody, gather around. Gather around. It's time for the info dump. Come on, everybody. Info dump time. I avoid info dumps like the plague. As a player, I really don't care about how faster than light works and the intricacies of galactic politics. That's one of the reasons why the first Star Wars movie, Phantom Menace, people are like, seriously? This is the beef? Some trade deal? What? It's like, okie doke. Chris Lundgren asks if Warhammer Fantasy is popular in Europe. Yeah, they do pretty well. Let's see. Kevin Thorpe says Games Workshop was massive back in the 80s role-playing game scene. Thanks to them, RuneQuest outsold D&D for a while. We like grime and grit. Yeah, I was going to say, I remember having heard about how RuneQuest did really well over in Europe. It's kind of funny. As of late, I've been running across RuneQuest getting some pushback from gamers. I've been seeing it just popping up in my feeds where it's like, is RuneQuest too complex? And things like that, sort of like, no, it's not. Maybe it's too complex for the person shooting the video. But I think the reality is that where the complexity is if you want to try to utilize all of that world building that Greg Stafford did at your game table, which I got to be very honest with you, I wouldn't. It's like, no way, because right there, just what we were discussing about doing an info dump. If you sit there and you figure, I want to incorporate all of these cool things from Glorantha in my game sessions, you're just going to be info dumping left and right on people, and nothing is ever going to get done. So Chris Lundgren says, among the first Polish role-playing games was Crystals of Time. Kabuki Kid says, info dump, the role-playing game. Kabuki Kid says, the Expanse also never really clarifies how fast everyone can travel and exactly how. Kabuki Kid said the author said he never wanted to paint himself into a corner. It's actually two guys. They use a pen name. Funny enough, The Expanse started off as a role-playing game. a private role-playing game. I can't remember which the two guys. And the second guy was a writer. But the first guy was just a gamer. And The Expanse was his, it was a role-playing game that he ran for different groups. So I thought that was kind of cool. I thought that was really cool. Strangely enough, the role-playing game that came out is from Green Ronin. And I want to say it's built on their Age engine. It's kind of wild. Kind of wild. All righty then. So, like I said, the reasons why people think fantasy role-playing games are the most popular genre, I don't buy into. Like I said, because it was the first role-playing game. No, I don't see that at all, especially the way gamers are and have been forever. When people are like, oh, yeah, this is awful. Let's just stick with it. So, anywho, I like running fantasy role-playing games. I wish I had an opportunity to do it more often. Kevin R. Smith says, thought they were both writers. Second guy wanted to run group in the first guy's setting. Book one's A and B plots were their two campaigns. That's not how I've heard it. Not how I've heard it, but I don't know. It's not like I haven't, done a lot of research into it. Just I remember reading about now I can't remember the author, the pen name that they use. So Kevin R. Smith says, yes, the Expanse role-playing game is built on the Age system, specifically modern Age. Honestly, I would think out of the various genres out there, the one that probably pulls in, I don't want to say the fewest, but I would think probably low down in the pecking order is probably modern Age. I don't know. I mean, the reality is, if I were running a modern era role-playing game, there's got to be something else. Got to be something else. Got to be horror or something going on. So I certainly wouldn't want to be running, just like Gangbusters. When Gangbusters came out for TSR, it sold all right, and then they really didn't support it all that much because it was kind of like, oh, okay. All right, so we're prohibition agents. Okay, all righty. I mean, you could play other kind of characters, but for the most part, yeah, I don't think modern era just, we're a SWAT team or we're special forces or something along those lines. I don't think many people jump at the opportunity to play those. Kim Thorpe says superhero role-playing games, the ginger stepchild of role-playing games. I think superhero role-playing games can be very difficult to pull off. Chris Lundgren's mentioning Gangbuster BX, which doesn't that have like a Call of Cthulhu-ish mythos angle to it, or one of the books for it does? Lenny Blade says Delta Green is a great modern Age role-playing game. Modern era, yeah. Yes, it is, but it also is a horror game. So personally, I got to be honest, some of the adventures that come out for Delta Green are, got to be a particular type to play those. The Badger says, I don't think they supported Indiana Jones much at all either. That got almost no support. But I never had it. I don't even think I ever took a look at it. But I heard it was pretty bad. So Kevin R. Smith says, well, Indiana Jones also has that problem where everybody wants to play indie, Nobody wants to play short round. You can run into that with Doctor Who. So my recommendation for Doctor Who, the role-playing game, is not to have the Doctor in it as a character, as a player character. That would be that. Agile Monk says they played Champions in early 80s and onward. It was a great superhero system. AD says, in fantasy games, players save the day. You get to be a true hero. That's a classic archetype all of us want to be, the hero. Yeah, I wasn't going to get into a whole bunch of like Joseph Campbell stuff here. But I think that kind of goes without saying with that too, right? Kevin Thorpe said, I heard Cult is pretty dark. Yeah, I have too. I heard that too. In fact, if I remember correctly, they reached out to see if I wanted to review their game. And then I never heard from them again. So I was like, okay, all right. Badger says, champions and villains and vigilantes are the best of the old school superhero role-playing games. A lot of people love Phase Rip. I don't know. Chris Lundgren says they want a Sword of Shannara role-playing game. Those books are amazing. Even the prequels that take place in our world when demons come back. Didn't Steve Jackson Games do a GURPS book for Shannara? I could have swore somebody once did a source book. I don't think there's ever been an actual role-playing game. Is Terry Brooks still around? I do not know. I do not know. Oh, last thing I'm going to mention, since we've kind of wrapped up on the topic. So I see an article talking about how George R.R. Martin says that the next book should be ready to go in 2025 from A Song of Ice and Fire. And my understanding, at least this was the gist of the article, is it's gotten to the point where people just don't care anymore. It's like, dude, it's been 13 years since the last book. We don't care. So I don't know. And that's not his last book, is it? I thought it's supposed to be the next book and then there's a final book. I stopped reading A Song of Ice and Fire after the third book, I think, because you could see where he was going. When he started off, he had a game plan of writing a trilogy and then saw what was going on with Robert Jordan and thought, oh, well, okay. I'm going to make this longer than a trilogy. I don't know. I don't know if we're ever going to actually see that book or not. Steven says, don't worry, he'll die, and then Sanderson will finish it up in like 2 years. Yeah. Semper Buffo says, I don't care. Kevin R. Smith says, yep, there's supposed to be one more after this. I don't know. Kevin R. Smith says, also see Patrick Rothfuss and whether we'll ever see the last book in his trilogy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I've heard stories about, he got some advances and stuff, and the publishers are pissed. And I was going to start reading his series, and I was like, yeah, but I guess I don't know. I don't want to read something where it's like, well, might not ever see the last book. Which is weird, because when a new series comes out, you start reading it, there's no guarantee you're ever going to see the last books on those either. Cracks the Bold says, love the books, but the TV show killed it for them. I think that's the main problem George R.R. Martin has. I've said this before. I think the ending of the TV series is the ending he had planned. And seeing just the huge backlash to that, he doesn't know how to wrap it up now. Part of him wants to do it like Up Yours, right? It's my book. I'm going to finish this series up the way I want to. And then on the other hand, he doesn't want to have to put up with a lot of people being really pissed. Don't know. Do not know. All righty then. That is it for this time out. As far as tomorrow night, I have absolutely no idea what the topic is going to be. Not a clue. So tune in, you'll find out. Anyway, if you're watching live, thank you very much. If you watched live and took part in chat, a much bigger thank you. It is much appreciated because you're not only keeping me company, you're keeping each other company too. But of course, I know plenty of folks out there, they don't have an opportunity to watch live. Doesn't matter if you're watching live or on Memorex. Thank you very much for taking time out to watch any of the nearly 2,000 videos here on the Gaming Gang channel. If you liked the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when the Dispatch streams live Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube. I'll also inform you when I upload other videos, such as today's first look at a jest of Robin Hood from GMT Games. Looks really interesting. So you might want to take a peek. But of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Everybody enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it is in your neck of the woods. And until I see you next time, hopefully tomorrow, as always, I certainly wish all of you an opportunity to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.